What's up, my friend? Abby here, and welcome back to Writer's Life Wednesdays, where we come together to help you make your story matter. It's October, otherwise known as Preptober, for every writer out there taking on the challenge of NaNoWriMo, and this is the month that we have to prepare ourselves to write an entire novel, or at least 50,000 words, in November. If you've been following my channel, you know that I'm doing a super special series for this Preptober, Outline My Novel With Me. I've been taking you behind the scenes and showing you my process, how I take all my messy ideas and turn them into a solid, beautiful outline. Last week we started things off the right way by outlining our character profiles and also figuring out the themes of our stories. Definitely check out that video if you haven't seen it already, and definitely outline your character profiles before you outline the actual plot, okay? That's super important. Today, we're going to get to the actual outlining part, so that means taking my character profile for my protagonist and her internal journey and transformation and combining it with the 3-act story structure and creating a small but powerful outline for my nano novel. Let's go. You might have heard of the 3-act story structure before. You might even use it, but just in case you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is what the 3-act story structure is in a nutshell. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 are the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. I actually made a whole video series on the 3-act story structure and why it's such a good idea to use this story structure even if you normally don't like story structures. So watch the intro video at least for that series if you're at all skeptical about this. Why do I love the 3-act story structure? Incidentally, 3 reasons. First, because it is tried and true. So many super successful, best-selling, history-making stories have used this story structure, and that alone is a pretty darn good reason to use it. 2, because it's all about the protagonist's internal journey. Most story structures focus too much on the external events, the plot, without really digging deep into why it matters, which is the story. That is the biggest reason why I love the 3-act story structure, because it flows with the external events beautifully. But at every story beat, we're unearthing the reason why everything that happens matters to the characters, and thus to the reader. And the 3rd reason why I love this structure is it's bendable. Once you use it a lot and understand the reason behind each story beat, you can change it up. They say that once you know the rules, you can break them, but I prefer to say once you know the rules, you can bend them. You can adjust this story structure. You can get creative with it. You can move some story beats around and make these minor adjustments that make it more unique and make it yours and make it fit better with your protagonist's internal journey. Pretty awesome. Oh, and there's a 4th reason too. It works with every genre. So let me show you what this structure looks like. I have a downloadable and printable version of this exact document, complete with the question prompts for you, in the description box of this video, so be sure to check that out. Okay, so let's just go through it. Act 1, hook. Introduction to the protagonist's internal conflict. The hook is internal conflict, which is simple: desire versus fear. Despite popular belief, the internal conflict starts long before the inciting incident shows up to destroy your protagonist's life. In fact, that conflict has been boiling just below the surface this whole time. Otherwise, your inciting incident wouldn't matter. See, external conflict, the plot, is all about what happens, but internal conflict, the story, is about why it matters. So ask yourself, what does my protagonist think will bring her true happiness or contentment, and how is her fear stopping her from going after it? See, this is tying right into what we learned last week about the character profile when we were doing the character profile. If you do that work beforehand, you will be able to do this so much easier because you have all your answers in your character profile. Inciting incident. Protagonist is pushed outside their comfort zone. This is the event that really sets your story in motion. Your inciting incident doesn't have to be some big, crazy, epic call to adventure. It just has to be something that pushes your protagonist outside their comfort zone. A conflict surfaces, something the protagonist has to face head on. It's really as simple as that. Don't overcomplicate it, as many writers do. If you know why the inciting incident matters to the protagonist and you let them react to it as a normal person would, running for cover because of their fear, congratulations, you nailed it. Ask yourself, yourself, why does this inciting incident matter to my protagonist? How does it push her outside her comfort zone? And this goes right with what we developed in the character profile when we figured out your character's fear. That therapy session, the answers that your character gave you in that therapy session are gonna come in handy right now. Build up, facing the consequences. Protagonist is going to have to face this thing head on. The reader can now see what the protagonist's internal struggle really is and how this whole situation is going to be especially tricky for her to navigate. Ask yourself what internal conflict is going to arise for my protagonist in wake of the inciting incident. First plot point. Protagonist makes a decision which determines what happens next. Your protagonist is a conflicted person torn between desire and fear. So, when the inciting incident steps in and shoves them outside their comfort zone, their fear takes over and they respond all wrong, which sets up more obstacles for the rest of the book. Ask yourself, how is my protagonist going to react to the inciting incident given their fear and misbelief about the world? What decision are they going to make now to avoid the most pain and get what they want while steering clear of the thing they're afraid of? I love this plot point so much because it is really what sets the story in motion. It's what's gonna set all the turmoil and conflict, the external conflict and the internal conflict in motion for the rest of your book. And it all roots back to that basic fundamental level of psychology. You want to avoid the most pain, don't you? Don't we all? And the last story beat of Act 1, the first pinch point. Opposition or antagonistic force looms in the distance. You can have a pinch point even if you don't have a villain character in your story. It doesn't have to be a villain, it doesn't have to be a person. It just has to be something that is ultimately going to come back to haunt the protagonist later. It can even be the protagonist's misbelief. Ask yourself, what is the opposition or antagonistic force that my protagonist is going to have to face head on later? How can I show the reader that is already looming in the distance? Okay, so now we're on to Act 2. Pre-midpoint reactionary hero. Protagonist pursues their fear-based goal. Thanks to the decision your protagonist made at the end of Act 1, they are now a man or woman with a plan. They have a goal now that they are actively pursuing. Essentially, they're going after the thing that they think will make them happy while steering clear of the thing that they're afraid of. Whether they're running away from something or running to something, their motivation is the same. Avoid as much pain as possible and get to the finish line where happiness awaits. Ask yourself, how is my protagonist going to execute their plan, achieve goal, avoid fear? What is their step-by-step plan for making this happen? Even if they don't know every step themselves, you should. And what do you know, we're already at the midpoint of your story. The game-changing midpoint. Plot twist, a game-changing midpoint doesn't have to be some epic and crazy twist of fate. Can be, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, the only thing a game-changing midpoint has to do is surprise the protagonist and shift their goal. Bonus points if you can surprise the reader at the same time. So ask yourself, what unexpected thing is going to upend my protagonist's plan and entire life? Why does it matter to my protagonist given their desire and fear? How is it going to change the game for my protagonist? So now coming out of the 50% mark of the story structure, the post-midpoint action hero. Protagonist approaches their goal from a different angle. Figure out how your protagonist is going to handle the plot twist. It's sort of like another inciting incident, shoving them further outside their comfort zone and presenting a new and unexpected challenge. Give your protagonist a plan going forward and a sense of where this is going. Your readers want to know what happens next because they can foresee what might happen. Ask yourself, what is my protagonist's new plan going to be based on the game-changing midpoint and what it means to them? How does my protagonist think their new plan is actually going to work and bring them to their goal while still avoiding their fear? And the last story beat of Act 2, you guessed it, the second pinch point. Opposition, antagonistic force, gets closer. Remember, your opposition doesn't have to be an actual villain or a person. It can be the protagonist's misbelief always looming in the background, getting ready to attack them come Act 3. Whatever the major opposition your protagonist is going to face off with at the climax of your story, that's what you want to give the reader a taste of at this story beat. Ask yourself, how can I show the opposition or antagonistic force now getting closer to disrupting the protagonist's life? So that's the end of Act 2, and now we're on to Act 3, which actually begins with a optional story beat. You can take this one out if you don't have room for it in your story, but it is so deliciously painful if you do have room for it. And it is supposed victory. Protagonist thinks they have overcome. Making progress with their new and improved plan, the protagonist feels confident they will be victorious, or perhaps they've already overcome the smallest of the challenges and feel pretty good about their plan. Little do they know, disaster is on the way. So this plot point is optional, but awesome. Ask yourself, why does my protagonist think they will be victorious? What's happening to make them feel so close to achieving their goal and finding happiness at last? And of course, the supposed victory would not be painful and delicious without a disaster. So next story beat is the disaster, where everything goes wrong. Bring your protagonist to their knees by rooting the disaster in their greatest fear and misbelief. It might be something that's terrible for anyone to experience, but go beyond that and make it something especially bad for your protagonist because of their fear and misbelief. Ask yourself, what does this disaster specifically mean to my protagonist? How does it force them to realize that they're the one to blame for this crisis? How does it completely disarm them and make them face off with their greatest fear and misbelief? And that leads us to the dark moment where protagonist is hopeless. It's always darkest before the dawn. Your protagonist needs a rock bottom moment in order to have an aha moment, and that's what makes the revelation so satisfying. But right now, in wake of the disaster, your protagonist is feeling utterly and completely broken, confused, lost, and disappointed. Needless to say, this is the most fun story beat to write, where you're completely destroying your character's life. And at last, we have my favorite story beat, the aha moment. Renewed hope. This is the biggest pivotal moment in your whole story. After your protagonist has been brought to their knees by the disaster, they have a revelation, an aha moment. They can suddenly see how their fear and misbelief has led them to make the wrong decisions about everything. They realize how wrong they were, but most importantly, they see that they'll have to overcome their fear and make the right decisions in order to achieve their goal, true happiness. So ask yourself, how is my protagonist going to overcome their fear and continue to the climax, therefore developing as a character? What lesson are they going to learn and simultaneously teach the audience? And then we have the climactic confrontation. Protagonist faces their biggest challenge yet. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for, where the protagonist is going to face their most difficult challenge yet. It's a true test of their character, and how they respond to the confrontation is the proof that they've transformed as a result of their journey. So your protagonist has already won the internal battle in their aha moment, but now it's time for them to win the external battle, which of course will force them to face off with their greatest fears. And this doesn't have to be like an actual battle if you're not writing like fantasy or sci-fi, okay? There can be a battle. There can be a climactic confrontation in contemporary. Ask yourself, how does my protagonist prove their transformation by crushing their misbelief and facing their greatest fear with courage? Victory. Protagonist overcomes. This doesn't necessarily mean the protagonist wins the external battle or that things turn out exactly as they hoped, but the protagonist does experience a personal victory because they overcame their fear and destroyed their misbelief. Here's my rule of thumb. If your reader doesn't know how the character is transformed as a result of their journey, you need to rewrite your book until they do. So ask yourself, how has my protagonist changed as a result of their journey? And the last story beat of all, the resolution, wrapping up loose ends. This is the part where all the loose ends are tied up. The reader should be left with no missing information or silent questions. If the book is part of a series, then you may want to end with a cliffhanger by swapping out the victory story beat with another plot twist. If the book is a standalone, make sure the reader's questions are answered when they reach the final page. So that's the 3-act story structure, and if you want a more detailed explanation of it, definitely check out that series that I mentioned earlier. Also, in the future, I'm going to be making more videos breaking down each story beat, like in a video of its own, and what it looks like in an actual story. So that's coming soon, hopefully. Make sure you're subscribed. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is take my character profile for my protagonist that I outlined last week and combine it with the 3-act story structure. So that means taking my ideas for the actual plot and seeing where they fit within the story structure, because I pretty much know what's gonna happen, but I just don't know where it's going to happen. Maybe it's just me, but this part of the outlining process is so satisfying. It's like organizing all of your ideas and neatly putting them where they belong in your outline. It's beautiful. Of course, just like when you're organizing and cleaning your house, there's some stuff that's gotta go. Not all your ideas will make it into your outline, and that's okay. Decluttering is good. Just ask yourself, when you approach any element of your story, ask yourself with everything, how does this element matter to the story I'm telling? And if you can't come up with a good answer, toss it. But wait, Abbie, can't I just write it into the story now and then edit it out later if it's not working? No. Please don't do that. I mean, you can, but that means a lot more editing later on, just because you don't want to put more thought into your story right now. See, this is how I outline. I try my best to perfect everything about the story before I write it, and that's why my outlines are so detailed, and that's why my first drafts are so clean. Like, I don't have to do hardly any developmental editing because I did my developmental editing before I wrote the book. Okay, this is kind of my hack for writing a great first draft. Not that I don't have to edit, of course I have to edit, every writer has to edit, but it's mostly line edits and maybe adding a few scenes here and there, never like rebuilding the whole story itself. That's just my process, take it or leave it. I recommend taking it. So enough talk, let's get to work. So I'm gonna jump back into my Scrivener project and start outlining my book using the 3-act story structure. And this is really like the moment of truth where I see how much I really have and what I still need to work out. So let's get to it. Okay, so I'm feeling really good about this 3-act story structure. It always makes me feel so much better about my stories. Like, whenever I'm like, is this really a coherent idea? And then I put even just like a bullet outline, even if I just put together a bullet point outline, it feels so much better. Like, it just comes to life. It's so satisfying. I don't even know how to describe it. You'll know when you do it. Just do it. So quick sit rep on my NaNo novel. I pretty much have everything figured out as far as the story beats go. I've found places to put pretty much all my ideas into the 3-act story structure. A couple of the story beats kind of still need something, and I'm having a little bit of trouble with my inciting incident. Like, I know what it's gonna be, but I don't know like how it's going to happen. Like, I know I want this thing to happen, but I'm like, how logically can that even happen? So I still have to work out that element of it, but I'm obviously going to work on that more this week and resolve any of the issues and write at least 1 or 2 paragraphs for each story beat so that I know exactly what's gonna happen and when. Remember, this is not my detailed outline yet. That's next week. Also next week, we're going to talk about scene cards. I was originally gonna do the scene cards video on the last week of October, but then I realized the last Wednesday of October is the 30th, which doesn't give us a whole lot of time to work on our scene cards. So we'll talk about scene cards in next week's episode, plus I'll show you how I outline in detail. And then the last week of Preptober, I'll show you how I make time for writing in November. We'll talk about schedules and routines and habits and workspaces, plus I'll show you my notebook setups and my binders and just all the other stuff that goes into my writing process. Okay, I'm so excited for the next couple of weeks. They're gonna be amazing, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss those next videos, and ring the bell so you're the first to know when I release them. Also, be sure to grab the 3-act story structure template. That's in the description box below. You will see the link to the PDF. You can download it, bring it into your Scrivener, and outline away. It has all the descriptions under the story beats and the questions and the prompts as well. Comment below and tell me, how is your Preptober going? And if you used the 3-act story structure template, let me know how it went and what was your favorite part of it. Smash that like button if you liked this video, and be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because Preptober is far from over and we still have a lot to talk about. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon because that's where we go beyond videos and take storytelling to the next level. The Patreon community is not only the best way to support what I'm doing here on YouTube, but also connect personally with me and get better guidance on your story. So go to patreon.com/Abbie Emmons and check out all the awesome extra content that I've made for you. Also, I just want to say thank you for 10K. I'm not gonna get emotional, okay? I promise. I will not. Okay, I can't promise that. I love you guys so much and I so appreciate you being here and watching my videos. I literally screamed a little and did air punches when I realized and saw on YouTube that we have grown to 10,000 people in this community. It's so amazing and I'm just so thrilled and excited to see where the future takes us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing and just making this whole thing amazing. Until next week, my friend, happy outlining and rock on.